The wolf knelt in fresh snow and Rowan's hand found the hilt of his blade. February wind cut through the execution square, carrying the scent of pine and fear. 300 wolves formed a silent ring around them, their breath clouding in the Montana dawn. The kneeling wolf, Thomas Beta Class, father of two, kept his eyes down, shoulders trembling beneath a threadbare coat. Rowan stood above him, Alpha King of Silverwood Pack, and felt nothing. His father had taught him that mercy was a luxury reserved for those who could afford to appear weak. Kings who bent rules died with their throats torn out. The old lessons ran deep, carved into his bones through years of watching his father dispense justice without hesitation, without doubt. Thomas had broken protocol. His son, fevered and crying through the night, had been left in the care of appointed healers as tradition demanded. But Thomas couldn't bear the sound anymore. He'd violated the nursery at midnight, held his boy against regulations, rocked him until the fever broke. A servant had witnessed it. The council had convened. The verdict was unanimous. High Counselor Vincent stood at Rowan's right, expression carved from granite. The old wolf had served 3 alphas, outlasted 2 generations of challengers, and never once questioned the weight of tradition. His voice carried across the square without strain. Thomas Garrett, you have confessed to willful violation of sacred protocol. The appointed healers exist for purpose. Your interference suggests you believe yourself wiser than centuries of accumulated knowledge. Do you dispute this charge? Thomas lifted his head. His eyes found Rowan's, and something passed between them, a question perhaps, a plea for understanding from one father to another. Rowan's jaw tightened. He had no children yet. No frame of reference for the desperation that would drive a wolf to risk everything for a crying infant. I don't dispute it, Thomas's voice cracked. My son needed me. I would do it again. A ripple moved through the assembled pack. Vincent's hand curled into a fist at his side. Defiance made examples necessary. Rowan had learned this at 15, watching his father execute a wolf who'd questioned battle orders. The pack must see strength. Hesitation bred doubt. Doubt bred chaos. Rowan drew his blade. Silver gleamed in morning light, etched with symbols older than living memory. His father's sword and his grandfather's before that. The weight felt familiar in his palm, an extension of will and duty. Thomas closed his eyes. Rowan raised the blade. The execution was clean, fast, merciful in its efficiency. Blood steamed where it hit snow, and Thomas's body slumped forward without sound. Vincent nodded approval. The pack remained silent, as they always did, bearing witness to the price of broken tradition. Rowan cleaned his blade on Thomas's coat and sheathed it without ceremony. He turned from the body, from the widening pool of crimson, from the 2 children who would grow up fatherless because their father had loved them too much. His boots left dark prints in pristine white as he crossed the square toward the palace. The crowd parted before him. No one met his eyes. 3 years ago, Rowan had believed this was strength, certainty, the ability to enforce law without flinching. His father's voice lived in his head, steady and sure, reminding him that wolves respected power above all else. Show weakness, and they would tear him apart. Show mercy, and they would mistake it for softness. He climbed the palace steps alone. Vincent would handle the body. The council would disperse. Life in Silverwood Pack would continue as it always had, governed by rules that predated memory, enforced by alphas, who understood that tradition was the spine that kept them upright. The stone corridors swallowed him in familiar cold. Oil lamps flickered in their sconces, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Rowan's chambers lay in the eastern wing, separated from the council hall by 3 levels of carved rock and carefully maintained distance. He pushed through the heavy oak door and stopped. Elena sat by the window, wrapped in furs, against the chill that no fire could fully banish. She'd been reading some book of poetry from her homeland, but the pages lay forgotten in her lap now. Her gray eyes tracked him as he entered, searching his face for something he wasn't sure he possessed anymore. Is it done? Her voice carried the soft accent of Pinecrest Pack Northern Territory, where mountains met Canadian wilderness and wolves learned to survive on stubbornness and sharp teeth. Rowan moved to the wash basin, scrubbing blood from his hands with methodical precision. The water turned pink, then red, then cleared as he rinsed and scrubbed again. It's done. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her words came carefully testing weight on thin ice. Thomas's wife was in the kitchens yesterday. She told me their son had been crying for 3 days. The healer said it was normal. that all children cry. Rowan dried his hands on a clean cloth, avoiding her reflection in the silver mirror above the basin. 3 years of marriage, and he still couldn't read the judgment in her tone. Couldn't tell if she questioned him or simply stated facts. The healers know their craft. Do they? He turned then, studying his wife properly for the first time that morning. She'd bound her dark hair in a simple braid, no ornaments or jewels. The furs that draped her shoulders had been a gift from her father, mended twice since she'd brought them south. Elena had never quite adapted to Silverwood luxury. She wore wealth like borrowed clothes, never quite comfortable, always conscious of the fit. You disagree with the sentence? It wasn't a question. Elena set her book aside and rose, moving with the easy grace that had first caught his attention during the marriage negotiations. She was tall for a female, lean and strong, from a childhood spent hunting mountain game. Her father had raised her like a son in some ways, taught her to track, to fight, to think strategically. Qualities Rowan had respected even as the council muttered about her lack of traditional feminine refinement. I think Thomas loved his son. Her hands clasped before her knuckles white. I think that love drove him to break a rule that seemed arbitrary in the moment. And I think you killed him for it. The words hung between them, sharp as drawn blades. Rowan felt his alpha power stir, an instinctive response to challenge. He pushed it down. Elena wasn't pack-born Silverwood. She didn't understand the delicate balance that kept 500 wolves unified under one banner. Didn't grasp how quickly order could fracture without consistent enforcement. I killed him because he defied protocol. Because if I let one wolf decide which rules matter and which don't, then none of them matter. The pack fractures. Chaos follows. He paced to the window, staring out at mountains capped with eternal snow. My father taught me that kingdoms fall when kings value individual feelings over collective stability. Your father was a hard man. Elena joined him at the window, standing close enough that he could smell lavender in her hair. Some soap she'd brought from home, another piece of pine crest she refused to abandon. That hardness kept Silverwood strong through 2 border wars and a famine. I don't dispute his effectiveness. But, she met his eyes without flinching, but he's been dead 3 years, Rowan, and you're still trying to be him. The observation cut deeper than she could know. His father had died on Ironpaw territory, throat torn out by Garrett himself during a dispute over hunting grounds. Rowan had been 29, newly mated to Elena, in a political marriage designed to secure Silverwood's northern border. His father's last words had been tactical instructions: hold the eastern line, never trust Ironpaw, show no weakness. Not I love you or I'm proud. Just duty delivered with his final breath. Rowan had spent 3 years trying to fill boots that seemed impossibly large, trying to match the certainty that had guided every one of his father's decisions, trying to silence the small voice in his head that whispered, maybe there was another way. I'm trying to keep us alive. Elena's hand found his fingers, threading through his with careful intent. The gesture felt foreign, intimate, in a way their marriage had never quite achieved. They coupled when duty demanded maintain public appearances of unity, shared chambers, because tradition required it. But this simple touch offered without strategy, this was new. I know, and I'm trying to understand, but Rowan, when we have children, she paused, swallowing hard. When we have children, I need to know you won't choose tradition over their well-being, that you'll see them as more than protocol to be enforced. He wanted to reassure her, wanted to promise that fatherhood would somehow unlock reserves of warmth his own father had never shown. But Rowan had been raised in ice and iron, taught that love was a liability and sentiment a weakness. He didn't know how to be anything else. When we have children, they'll be raised as royal heirs, with all the protections and expectations that entails. Elena pulled her hand back. The distance between them grew measurable in inches and unbridgeable in understanding. Of course, I should have known better than to expect softness from the wolf of Silverwood. She left him standing at the window, her footsteps fading into the stone labyrinth of the palace. Rowan remained alone, watching snow fall on the execution square below. Servants were already clearing Thomas's body, scrubbing blood from pristine white. By evening, no trace of the morning's work would remain. By next week, the pack would have forgotten Thomas Garrett entirely. But Rowan suspected he would remember, would carry the weight of that life the way he carried all the others his father had taught him to take without hesitation. Would wonder in moments of weakness whether Elena was right, whether he was becoming his father or whether he had always been his father's son and simply never questioned it until now. The snow continued falling indifferent to the questions it witnessed. Rowan first met Elena 4 years ago during negotiations to end the Pinecrest border dispute. Her father, Beta Adrian, had brought her south as part of the delegation unusual for such talks, but Pinecrest operated under different customs. They valued tactical minds over adherence to gender expectations. Elena had sat at her father's right hand, silent but observant, gray eyes tracking every speaker with the focus of a born strategist. The dispute centered on hunting rights in the mountain passes between territories. Silverwood claimed historical precedent. Pinecrest argued necessity. Their land was harsh game scarce during brutal winters. Talks had dragged on for 3 days when Rowan's father finally lost patience. "We've been generous with our time, Adrian, but Silverwood will not yield ground our ancestors bled to secure. If Pinecrest cannot sustain itself within its own borders, perhaps stronger leadership is required." The insult hung in the air. Beta Adrian's face darkened, his wolves tensing for violence. Rowan prepared for the negotiations to collapse entirely for another year of skirmishes and wasted resources. Then Elena spoke. "Alpha Magnus, with respect, you're arguing from a position that no longer exists." Every head turned. Rowan's father leaned forward, expression dangerous. Females didn't interrupt territorial discussions, didn't challenge alphas directly. Elena seemed unaware of or unconcerned by the breach in protocol. "Explain yourself, girl." The last survey of Silverwood's northern hunting grounds was conducted 12 years ago. Since then, a forest fire destroyed 30% of the deer population in that sector. Your wolves don't hunt there anymore because the game isn't worth the trek. You're defending territory you've already abandoned in practice while we starve defending pride. She produced a map marked with recent game trails and population estimates. Rowan found himself leaning in, impressed, despite himself, by the precision of her research. Pinecrest proposes a formal exchange. We cede our claim to the Eastern Valley, which you actually use in exchange for hunting rights in the northern sector you've already stopped utilizing. Both packs gain functional territory. Both save face. Both survive. Rowan's father studied the map for a long moment. Then he smiled, cold and calculating. "Adrian, your daughter has more spine than your entire council. I'll agree to her proposal on one condition." "Name it." "She marries my son, securing our alliance with blood as well as treaty." Rowan's stomach dropped. He'd known marriage would be political. Eventually, all alpha heirs understood this reality. But he'd imagined more time, imagined some choice in the matter. His father's gaze fixed on him, daring protest. Rowan remained silent. Beta Adrian looked to his daughter. Elena's expression hadn't changed, but her knuckles whitened where they gripped the map's edge. "If it ensures my pack's survival, I accept." The marriage was formalized within a month. Rowan and Elena spoke perhaps 10 words to each other before the ceremony, polite exchanges during diplomatic functions, nothing substantive. Their wedding night was awkward and clinical, both of them conscious of duty, but uncertain of each other. She was a stranger, wearing his ring, sleeping in his bed, carrying the title of Luna, without any of the intimacy that should accompany it. The first year was ice. They maintained appearances, attended councils together, presented a united front to both packs. In private, they were cordial strangers sharing space. Elena spent her days in the library devouring every text on Silverwood history and pack law. Rowan devoted himself to warrior training and border patrols, anything to avoid the uncomfortable silence of their chambers. The second year thawed slightly. Elena proved herself politically astute, offering counsel that helped resolve a trade dispute with Western territories. Rowan began to respect her mind, even if he didn't know how to reach her heart. They developed routines, morning reports over breakfast, evening walks through the palace gardens when weather permitted. Conversations remained superficial, but no longer strained. The third year brought unexpected warmth. Rowan's father died in summer, killed by Garrett during a border clash that escalated beyond control. The loss broke something in Rowan he hadn't known was brittle. For 3 days after the funeral, he couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't silence the voice in his head, cataloging every moment he'd failed to measure up to Magnus's standards. Elena found him in the training yard at midnight, beating his fists bloody against a practice dummy. She didn't speak, simply stood beside him until his rage exhausted itself. then led him back to their chambers and bandaged his hands with gentle efficiency. She stayed awake while he finally slept, keeping watch as if proximity alone could ward off nightmares. Something shifted between them after that. Not love. Rowan didn't know what love felt like anymore, if he'd ever known, but companionship, partnership. They began talking beyond surface pleasantries, sharing observations about council politics and pack dynamics. Elena made him laugh occasionally, dry wit catching him off guard. He found excuses to seek her company, her perspective. By the time they marked their third anniversary, Rowan realized with quiet surprise that he looked forward to seeing her each day, that her absence left chambers feeling empty, that her smile, rare and genuine, could lighten the weight that pressed constantly on his shoulders. He was falling in love with his wife. Slowly against expectation, despite every lesson his father had drilled into him about keeping emotions separate from duty. But Rowan had no idea how to tell her, no framework for expressing feelings his father had taught him to bury. So he showed it in small ways, ensuring her favorite tea appeared at breakfast, assigning the best guards to her detail, defending her suggestions in council meetings when others dismissed them, hoping she would understand the meaning behind gestures he couldn't articulate. If Elena noticed, she never acknowledged it. They maintained their careful distance, inches apart in bed, but miles separated in understanding. Rowan sometimes wondered if she'd learned to care for him too, or if duty alone kept her anchored in a marriage she'd never wanted. The question haunted him, unasked and unanswered, as summer turned to fall and fall descended into winter. Elena learned she was pregnant in October during the first snow. The healer, ancient Iris, who delivered 3 generations of Silverwood royalty, confirmed what Elena had suspected for weeks. 3 months along healthy, strong heartbeat. Iris predicted a spring birth, perhaps late March or early April. The news should have brought joy, should have united Rowan and Elena in shared anticipation. Instead, it drove them further apart, though neither could articulate why. Rowan received the information with careful control, congratulated Elena formally, informed the council that same afternoon, endured their toasts and well-wishes with appropriate grace. That night, alone in his study, he sat motionless for 2 hours, staring at nothing, feeling everything. He was terrified, bone-deep, nauseating terror that he would replicate his father's coldness with his own child, that he would fail to protect this fragile new life the way he'd failed his younger brother, that fatherhood would reveal every inadequacy he'd spent 3 years trying to hide behind alpha posturing. His brother Marcus, different from the council member who would later betray him, had died at 10. Weak lungs, the healer said, though Rowan suspected it was more than that. Marcus had been gentle, sensitive, everything their father despised. He'd cried easily, preferred reading to fighting, shrank from blood and violence. Their father had tried to harden him through increasingly brutal training regimens, make him strong or break him trying. The breaking came during a winter hunt. Marcus, struggling to keep pace with older wolves, had fallen through ice on a frozen lake. Rowan pulled him out, but the damage was done. Infection set in. Marcus lingered for a week before his lungs simply gave up. Their father's only comment, "Weakness finds a way to kill you. Better he died young than endangered the pack later." Rowan had been 15, old enough to hate his father for the callousness, young enough to still crave his approval. The contradiction had twisted something in him that never quite straightened out again. Now facing fatherhood himself, Rowan couldn't escape the question, would he be capable of the warmth his brother needed? Or would he inflict the same cold violence that had killed Marcus as surely as the ice-water Elena, for her part, withdrew into silent preparation? She read texts on infant care, consulted with experienced mothers in the pack plan nursery arrangements with meticulous detail. But she didn't share these preparations with Rowan, didn't invite him into the process or seek his input. They existed in parallel, preparing for the same event from opposite sides of an unbridgeable divide. December brought complications. Elena's pregnancy grew difficult, severe morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that kept her bedridden for weeks. Iris prescribed rest and special teas, assured them this was normal for first pregnancies, especially ones carrying strong alpha bloodlines. But Rowan saw fear in the old healer's eyes when she thought no one was watching. He wanted to comfort Elena, wanted to sit with her during the long nights when sickness kept her awake. But he didn't know how. His father had never modeled tenderness, had never shown Rowan what care looked like between mates. So Rowan defaulted to what he knew, ensuring the best healers attended her, posting guards outside her chambers, maintaining distance while providing material support. One night in January, Elena's maid found him outside the chamber doors. She'd been crying. He could see tear tracks on her weathered face. "Your Majesty the Luna asked me to inquire if you might sit with her. She's having a difficult evening and would appreciate the company." Rowan's first instinct was to decline, to send reassurances through the maid while maintaining his careful separation. But something in the old woman's expression stopped him, pity perhaps, or disappointment. "Of course. I'll attend her immediately." He found Elena propped against pillows, face pale and drawn. A basin sat beside the bed, evidence of recent sickness. She looked up as he entered, surprise flickering across her features. "I didn't think you'd come." The words stung more than accusation would have. Rowan settled into the chair by her bedside, suddenly aware of how little time they'd spent in simple proximity since she'd fallen ill. "You called for me. Where else would I be?" Elena's laugh was bitter and tired. "With the council, the warriors, anywhere duty demands and emotion doesn't." He had no defense against the truth. Instead, he reached for her hand, the gesture feeling clumsy and unpracticed. Her fingers were cold. He wrapped his warmer ones around them, offering heat, if not comfort. "I don't know how to do this." The admission escaped before he could contain it. "How to be what you need, what our child will need. My father never taught me, never showed me anything but strength and distance." Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried exhaustion that went beyond physical illness. "Then maybe you need to unlearn what your father taught, for you become him completely." "I'm trying. I don't know if I know how." "You start by being here, present, not because duty demands it, but because you choose it." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she possessed. "You start by seeing me as more than a political alliance or a vessel for your heir. You start by deciding that love matters more than the protocols that govern it." The word love hung between them unused in 3 years of marriage. Rowan turned it over in his mind, testing weight and meaning. Did he love Elena? He cared for her, that much he knew. Respected her intelligence, admired her strength, desired her company. But love. The word felt too large, too vulnerable, too dangerous for a wolf raised to equate emotion with weakness. "I care for you, more than I've cared for anyone since my brother died. That's the truth, even if I'm terrible at showing it." Elena's eyes filled, though whether with relief or sadness, he couldn't tell. "Then stay. Tonight. Just sit with me. Let that be enough for now." So he stayed, sat in the uncomfortable chair while she drifted into uneasy sleep, held her hand through nightmares and sickness, dozed occasionally, himself neck bent at an awkward angle. When dawn light filtered through the windows, they were still connected, palm to palm, choosing proximity, despite years of practiced distance. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was a beginning. On March arrived with unseasonable warmth, melting snow into rushing streams that fed the valley below Silverwood Palace. Elena's pregnancy reached its final stage, her body swollen and uncomfortable movement becoming labored. Iris predicted birth within days, perhaps a week at most. The council prepared for the royal heir with bureaucratic efficiency. Protocols were reviewed, ceremonies scheduled, nursery staff appointed. Vincent personally oversaw arrangements, ensuring every tradition was honored precisely. The bathing rituals, the blessing ceremonies, the formal presentations, all mapped out with exacting detail. Rowan attended these planning sessions with growing unease. Something about the clinical precision bothered him, though he couldn't articulate why. These were the same rituals his father had endured and his grandfather before that. Traditions existed for a reason. They connected past to present, maintained order, reinforced pack identity. But watching Vincent describe how 3 appointed servants would bathe the newborn heir in blessed water while parents observed from a respectful distance, Rowan couldn't shake the memory of Thomas Garrett kneeling in snow, of a father executed for the crime of holding his crying child. Elena said nothing during these meetings, her face an unreadable mask. Rowan wondered if she understood what was coming, if Pinecrest practiced similar rituals, or if this would be as foreign to her as everything else about Silverwood. Labor started on a Thursday, 3 weeks before the spring equinox. Elena's water broke during breakfast, and suddenly the careful planning became frantic reality. Iris and two assistant healers swept Elena away to the birthing chamber, a sterile room in the palace's oldest wing, designed specifically for royal births. Heavy curtains blocked windows. Candles provided flickering light. The air smelled of herbs and antiseptic. Rowan was forbidden entry. Tradition dictated that alphas remain separated during birth, maintaining strength and composure while mates endured the physical trial. His father had waited in the great hall conducting pack business while Rowan's mother labored, showing no concern, no distraction. Absolute focus on duty. Rowan tried to replicate that steel. Sat in his study reviewing border reports while Elena screamed in a room 3 corridors away. The screams went on for hours. Then the silence between them grew longer. Then the screaming stopped entirely, replaced by urgent voices and running footsteps. He lasted 2 more hours before fear broke through discipline. Rowan abandoned his desk and headed for the birthing chamber. Vincent intercepted him in the hallway, expression stern. "Your Majesty, you cannot enter. Protocol forbids." "I don't care about protocol." The words surprised him as much as they surprised Vincent. "My maid is in there. I'm going to her." "Your father never broke this tradition, never showed such weakness." "My father is dead." Rowan pushed past the old counselor, ignoring protests and gasps from assembled servants. "And I'm done being his ghost." He burst through the birthing chamber doors into controlled chaos. Iris and her assistants worked frantically around the bed, where Elena lay pale and soaked with sweat. Blood stained the sheets. Too much blood. Elena's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. Iris looked up, startled by his entrance. "Your Majesty, you shouldn't." "What's wrong?" Rowan crossed to the bedside, taking Elena's limp hand. Her skin felt cold. "What's happening?" "The baby is positioned wrong. We've been trying to turn it, but she's weakening. Lost too much blood already." Iris's ancient face showed cracks in its professional composure. "Your Majesty, you need to prepare yourself. We may not be able to save them both." The words hit like a physical blow. Rowan's grip tightened on Elena's hand, willing heat and strength into her failing body. "Save her. Whatever it costs, save my mate." "The heir! I said save her." His alpha power flared undeniable command. "Elena lives. That's not a request." Iris nodded and returned to her work. Rowan stayed at the bedside, murmuring words he'd never spoken aloud before. Promises and prayers and confessions he'd been too afraid to voice. Elena didn't respond, lost in fevered unconsciousness, but he said them anyway. Laid bare everything he'd hidden for 3 years, as if honesty could anchor her to life. "I love you. I've loved you since the 2nd year, maybe before. I'm sorry I never said it. Sorry I've been cold and distant and everything my father was. If you survive this, I'll spend every day proving it. I'll be better. I'll learn. Just don't leave me. Please, Elena, don't leave." The words felt clumsy and inadequate, but they were true. Rowan realized with crystalline clarity that losing Elena would break him in ways his father's death never had. That somewhere in 3 years of careful distance, she'd become essential, irreplaceable. Iris worked with focused intensity, murmuring instructions to her assistants. They shifted Elena's position, applied pressure to her abdomen. Iris reached up inside her face, set with concentration, and suddenly everything accelerated. "The baby's moving. One more push, Luna, if you have it in you." Elena's eyes flickered open, found Rowan's face through pain and exhaustion. Her hands squeezed his with surprising strength. "Don't let them take our baby." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Promise me, whatever tradition says, our child stays with us. I promise." He didn't know what she meant, didn't care, would promise anything to keep that desperate grip anchored to consciousness. "I swear it, Elena." She screamed, then a sound of agony and effort, and Iris pulled hard. A baby emerged in a rush of fluid and blood, small, pale, and naturally quiet. One of the assistants took the infant, wiping and wrapping, while Iris remained focused on Elena. "There's another one." Iris's voice carried shock. "Twins. I only felt one heartbeat, but there's definitely another." The second birth came faster. Another small body, this one crying immediately upon contact with air. The assistant who held the first baby gasped. "3. There's a third." Rowan's mind reeled. Triplets. 3 heirs when they'd expected one. The rarity of it, the blessing and complication all at once. Iris delivered the third baby with shaking hands, exhaustion evident in every movement. All three babies were small, too small, underdeveloped from sharing limited space. But they lived, cried with varying intensity. Three white wolves, fur-matted and damp paws too large for their bodies. Elena had lost consciousness again. Iris worked to stop the bleeding, her assistants moving with practiced efficiency. Rowan stood frozen, holding Elena's limp hand, staring at three tiny lives that had nearly cost him everything. Your Majesty. One of the assistants held the smallest baby toward him. The third heir, a daughter. He took her, automatically unprepared for the weight and warmth of new life. She was so small, fragile. Her eyes couldn't open yet, but she made soft mewling sounds, seeking warmth and comfort. Rowan held her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat flutter against his palm. This was his daughter, his child, part of Elena and part of him, miraculously alive despite odds that had nearly killed them all. The first whisper, a protective instinct, stirred in his chest, fierce and primal, transcending any emotion he'd felt before. He would die for this tiny creature, would kill anyone who threatened her, would burn the world to ash if it meant keeping her safe. Iris finally looked up from her work exhaustion and relief mingling on her weathered face. The bleeding stopped. She'll live. They'll all live with care and time. Rowan sagged with relief so profound his knees nearly buckled. He kissed his daughter's forehead gently, then passed her back to the assistant so he could properly hold Elena's hand. Thank you, Iris. You have my eternal gratitude. The old healer wiped blood from her hands and met his eyes with unexpected intensity. Your Majesty, what you did today, breaking protocol to be present, your father would have called it weakness. I know. I call it wisdom. She smiled, tired but genuine. These children are blessed to have a father who already loves them more than tradition. Remember that in the days ahead. You'll need it. The warning in her tone registered dimly, but Rowan was too overwhelmed to process it. He had a mate who lived and three children who needed him. Everything else could wait. For now, in this moment, he allowed himself to feel joy uncomplicated by duty or fear. Allowed himself to be a father and a mate before being an alpha. It was the last peaceful moment he would know for a long time. The council insisted on seeing the heirs immediately. Tradition demanded that royal children be presented within hours of birth, blessed and acknowledged before the pack. Rowan wanted to refuse to give Elena time to recover, to hold his children without ceremony. But Vincent's expression left no room for negotiation. The pack needs to see the heirs, your Majesty, needs to witness the continuation of your bloodline. Delay suggests weakness, suggests something is wrong. Something was wrong. Elena nearly died. Which is why we must show strength now. Prove that Silverwood's future is secure despite complications. Vincent's logic was inexorable, built on decades of political calculation. Your father understood this. After your birth, he held court within 6 hours, you in his arms, showing the pack his heir was strong. Rowan wanted to argue, wanted to point out that his father's example wasn't one he intended to follow anymore. But exhaustion weighted his limbs, and Elena needed rest more than she needed him fighting battles on her behalf. 1 hour, the council can see them for 1 hour, then I want privacy for my family. Vincent nodded, already moving to make arrangements. Servants appeared with ceremonial robes. The babies were taken from Elena's side. She was too weak to protest, barely conscious, and wrapped in formal cloths embroidered with pack symbols. Rowan followed them to the great hall, feeling like he was moving through a nightmare. The council assembled quickly, 15 wolves arranged in their traditional positions. Vincent at the head, Morgana the elderly, former Luna to his right, Marcus the young ambitious warrior near the back, all of them staring with calculating eyes at 3 tiny bundles being held by strangers. Behold the heirs of Silverwood Pack, Vincent announced. 3 white wolves blessed by ancient bloodlines born to continue our legacy. The servants held up the babies for inspection. The largest, Rowan's first son, had stopped crying and stared around with unfocused eyes. The middle child, another son, remained quiet, watchful, despite his blindness to detail. The smallest, his daughter, whimpered softly, seeking warmth that ceremonial cloths couldn't provide. What are their names? Morgana's voice carried across the hall, imperious and demanding. Rowan realized he and Elena hadn't discussed names, hadn't had time between her collapse and the chaos of triplet birth. He thought quickly, reaching for names that felt right. The first son is Caleb, strong and enduring. The second is Ash. The daughter is Nova. Murmurs of approval rippled through the council. Good names traditional without being pretentious. Vincent nodded satisfaction. And when will the blessing rituals begin? Tomorrow, Rowan said firmly, thinking of Elena resting 3 corridors away. The Luna needs to recover. The heirs need to bond with their mother. We'll begin formal ceremonies tomorrow. Traditionally, blessings occur within 12 hours. Tomorrow, Vincent. Rowan let Alpha Power edge his voice. My mate nearly died bringing these children into the world. She's earned a day to hold them before tradition claims them. The challenge hung in the air. Vincent's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head in acknowledgement. No one else spoke. The servants carried the babies from the hall, and Rowan followed, desperate to return them to Elena before some other protocol demanded their presence elsewhere. He found her awake when he entered the birthing chamber. Iris had cleaned her, changed the blood-soaked sheets, arranged her against fresh pillows. Elena looked like a ghost, pale and drawn, eyes hollow with exhaustion. But she reached for the babies, immediately, tears streaming, when servants placed all 3 in her arms. They're so small. Her voice broke on the words. So perfect and small. Rowan dismissed the servants and healers with a gesture, claiming privacy for his family. He sat beside Elena on the bed, helping arrange 3 squirming bodies so she could hold them all. Caleb found her breast instinctively and began to nurse. Ash nestled against her side. Nova made soft sounds, not quite crying, but clearly uncomfortable. Nova's struggling. Elena stroked their daughter's tiny head. She's not latching properly. She's too small. Iris said they're all underweight. Triplets usually are. They'll strengthen with time. I nearly killed them, carrying 3 when my body could barely manage 1. Guilt saturated every word. What kind of mother am I before they're even born? The kind who survived impossible odds to bring them safely into the world. Rowan kissed her forehead, tasting salt from tears. You're extraordinary, Elena. Our children are alive because you fought for them. She leaned into him, exhaustion pulling her towards sleep. The baby settled as her breathing evened out, Caleb still nursing Ash and Nova, simply absorbing warmth and safety. Rowan held them all, his small family contained in the circle of his arms, and felt terror wash over him again. This vulnerability, this overwhelming love, this was what his father had warned against. Weakness that enemies could exploit. Attachment that made you hesitate when strength demanded action. His father had loved Rowan's mother, surely, but never let it show. Never let it compromise his authority or cloud his judgment. Rowan looked at Nova's tiny face and knew with absolute certainty that he would compromise anything for her. For all of them. Would bend every tradition, break every rule, destroy anyone who threatened this fragile peace. His father would have called it weakness. Rowan called it being human. The door opened without warning. Vincent entered, expression apologetic but firm. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion, but we need to discuss the blessing schedule. The ritual bathing must be performed within 48 hours for maximum efficacy. The appointed servants are ready to begin preparations tomorrow morning. Rowan felt Elena tense against him. Her arms tightened around the babies, a mother's instinctive protection against perceived threat. What servants? Her voice carried an edge despite exhaustion. Vincent addressed Rowan rather than Elena as if she hadn't spoken. Meredith and her assistants. They've been trained in the sacred bathing rituals since childhood. Your Majesty, you were bathed by Meredith yourself. She served 3 generations of royal heirs. No, Elena's voice was stronger now, drawing Vincent's attention despite his attempts to ignore her. I'll bathe my own children. Vincent's expression hardened. Luna, Elena, with respect, you don't understand our traditions. Royal heirs must be bathed by appointed servants following specific protocols. It's been this way for centuries. I don't care how long you've been doing something wrong. The room went cold. Rowan felt the shift, Elena's exhaustion giving way to stubborn determination, Vincent's diplomatic courtesy cracking to reveal the iron underneath. This was the collision he'd been dreading, a tradition meeting defiance with neither willing to yield. Wrong, Vincent's voice could have frozen blood. You dare call sacred tradition wrong? I call taking newborns from their mother wrong. I call letting strangers handle them, during their most vulnerable hours wrong. Elena met the old wolf's glare without flinching. In Pinecrest, mothers bathe their own children. Fathers help. The pack witnesses, but families bond first. That's what I'll do here. Vincent turned to Rowan, appeal and command mingling in his expression. Your Majesty, you must explain to the Luna that Silverwood is not Pinecrest. We have standards, protocols that ensure royal heirs are properly blessed and protected. Rowan looked at Elena, fierce despite fragility, protective despite exhaustion. Looked at his children, small and vulnerable, completely dependent. Looked at Vincent, representative of everything his father had valued, every tradition that had shaped Silverwood for generations. He thought of Thomas Garrett, executed for holding his crying son. He thought of his brother Marcus, dead at 10 because gentleness was weakness. He thought of his father's last words, tactical instructions devoid of warmth. Elena is right. Vincent's face went white. Your Majesty, my children will be bathed by their parents. The pack can witness if protocol demands it, but I won't hand them to strangers within hours of their birth. Rowan stood gently, extracting himself from Elena's embrace without disturbing the babies. My mate nearly died today, Vincent. I broke protocol to be with her during birth. I'm not going to pretend that tradition matters more than their well-being now. This is madness. Your father, my father, is dead. The words came out sharper than intended, 3 years of suppressed grief and rebellion, concentrated into one moment. And I'm not going to let his ghost run my pack anymore. I'll honor tradition where it serves us. Where it doesn't, I'll make new traditions. Vincent's expression went from shock to calculation. Rowan could see the old wolf's mind working, assessing this unexpected defiance and planning response. When Vincent spoke again, his tone carried warning. You're making a mistake, Your Majesty. The Council won't support this breach of sacred protocol. You risk everything, your authority, your crown, your pack's unity, for sentiment. I risk everything for my family. That's not sentiment, that's priority. Vincent bowed stiffly and left without another word. The door closed behind him with ominous finality. Elena released a breath she'd been holding. Thank you. Tears streaked her cheeks again. I know that cost you. Rowan returned to the bed, resuming his position as protector of this small circle. It cost nothing that mattered. Let Vincent complain. Let the council argue. You and our children come first. He meant it. In that moment, holding his exhausted mate and 3 newborn lives, Rowan felt certainty for the first time since his father's death. This was his purpose, not enforcing protocols or maintaining his father's legacy, protecting the family he'd been lucky enough to create. Everything else could burn. But as Elena drifted into sleep and Rowan kept watch over his children, doubt crept back in. Vincent wasn't a fool. The council held significant power. Tradition ran deeper than any single alpha's will. Rowan had just declared war on centuries of accumulated precedent. He had no idea if he was strong enough to win. Nova whimpered in her sleep, and Rowan adjusted his hold, providing warmth. She settled immediately, trusting him completely. The weight of that trust was heavier than any crown. He would find the strength. He had to. These 3 lives depended on it. Outside, night fell over Silverwood Palace. In the council chambers, Vincent convened an emergency meeting. In the servant quarters, Meredith wept at the rejection of her sacred duty. In the barracks, young Marcus listened to older wolves grumble about an alpha gone soft. The storm was building. Rowan could feel it in his bones, that premonition of conflict that wolves learn to trust. But tonight he chose peace, chose to believe that love could be strength, chose his family over everything else. Morning would bring consequences. Tonight he had this moment. He made it count. The blessing ceremony was scheduled for 10 the next morning. Rowan woke to find Elena already awake, nursing Caleb, while Ash and Nova slept in a padded basket beside the bed. She looked better. Color had returned to her cheeks, though exhaustion still shadowed her eyes. I've been thinking about what Vincent said. Her voice was quiet, careful. About me not understanding Silverwood traditions. He's right, I don't want to. Rowan sat up, accepting the cup of tea a servant had left on the bedside table. The brew was cold, forgotten hours ago, but he drank it anyway. You don't need to understand them to question them. But I need you to understand what you're risking by supporting me. Elena switched Caleb to her other breast, the movement practiced despite having given birth less than 24 hours ago. Vincent will rally the council against you. He'll call this weakness. Probably already has. If you lose their confidence, then I lose it standing for something that matters. Elena, I watched my father execute a wolf for the crime of comforting his dying child. I've spent 3 years trying to be the alpha he wanted me to be, and it's made me cold and distant and exactly the kind of father I swore I'd never become. He reached over to stroke Nova's tiny head, marveling at her softness. I'm done. I'm done choosing duty over humanity. Done pretending that tradition justifies cruelty. Elena's eyes shone with something that might have been pride, or relief, or love, finally spoken into existence between them. Then we face this together. Together. The word felt foreign and perfect at once. Rowan had faced every challenge alone since his father died, convinced that asking for help betrayed weakness. But sitting here with Elena, watching her nourish one child while 2 others slept peacefully, he realized that isolation wasn't strength. Partnership was. A knock interrupted his revelation. Iris entered carrying supplies and wearing an expression that suggested she brought bad news. Your Majesty, Luna Elena, I'm sorry to intrude, but I need to check the children. Nova especially. She wasn't nursing well last night. Elena handed Caleb to Rowan and lifted Nova from the basket. The tiny white pup looked even smaller and daylight, her breathing rapid and shallow. Iris examined her with gentle efficiency, face growing increasingly concerned. She's not getting enough milk. Her body temperature is lower than I'd like. We need to supplement her feeding, keep her warmer. If she continues to decline... Iris trailed off, but the implication was clear. What do you need? Rowan heard the edge in his own voice, that alpha command demanding solutions. Constant contact with her mother would help. Skin to skin as much as possible. Elena's body heat and scent will encourage her to feed more actively, and I'll prepare a special milk mixture to supplement when she won't latch. Elena immediately pulled Nova against her bare chest, wrapping them both in furs. The pup made a small sound, relief or recognition, and burrowed closer. Whatever it takes, she's not leaving my arms until she's stronger. Iris nodded approval. This is good. This is what she needs. But Your Majesty, I must warn you, the blessing ceremony this morning will require the children to be separated from Elena for at least 2 hours. With Nova this fragile, that's not advisable. Rowan stood, decision made before conscious thought could second-guess it. Then we cancel the ceremony. Your Majesty, my daughter's life is more important than ceremony. Tell Vincent the blessing is postponed until Nova is strong enough to endure it. Iris looked like she wanted to argue, but wisdom won over duty. She bowed and left to deliver the message. Rowan could already imagine Vincent's reaction. The counselor would see this as weakness compounding, weakness evidence that sentiment had compromised the alpha's judgment. Let him think it. Nova's shallow breathing mattered more than Vincent's approval. Elena looked up at him with an expression that made 3 years of distance worth enduring. She understood what this cost him. Understood that each choice to prioritize family over tradition was a battle fought and won against everything his father had taught. Rowan, why? The door burst open without warning. Vincent stood in the entrance, face flushed with anger, barely contained beneath diplomatic courtesy. Your Majesty, this cannot stand. You've already disrupted the bathing ritual. Now you cancel the blessing ceremony entirely. The pack will see this as a sign of weakness, will question whether you're fit to lead if you cannot even properly present your own heirs. The pack will see an alpha who prioritizes his children's health over arbitrary scheduling. Rowan kept his voice level, though anger simmered beneath. Nova is struggling, Vincent. She needs her mother. That's not weakness. That's biology. Biology that royal heirs have overcome for generations. Your father was born early underweight, struggling just as Nova is now. The rituals strengthened him, made him the alpha he became. My father was a tyrant who died alone because he valued strength over connection. If that's what the rituals created, then maybe they need to change. Vincent's control finally cracked. You go too far, boy. Your father built this pack into the most powerful territory in the North. His methods worked. His traditions killed my brother. The words came from somewhere deep and painful, a truth Rowan had never spoken aloud. Marcus died because our father valued protocol over a child's actual needs, because the healers followed tradition instead of listening when something was clearly wrong. I watched it happen, Vincent. I watched tradition murder my brother. I won't watch it murder my daughter, too. Silence fell like a physical weight. Vincent stared at him, shock replacing anger. In the background, servants froze mid-task. Even the babies seemed to sense the tension, Caleb and Ash beginning to fuss. Vincent's voice, when he finally spoke, carried something that might have been genuine concern beneath the usual formality. Your Majesty, I understand you're afraid. Every father fears for his children, but abandoning tradition won't protect them. It will only weaken your ability to lead. The council is already questioning. Then let them question. Let them vote no confidence if they dare. But I won't sacrifice my children to prove strength to wolves who measure a leader by his cruelty. Vincent's expression hardened back into its usual mask. Very well. I'll inform the council that the blessing ceremony is postponed indefinitely. But understand, Your Majesty, every choice you make in defiance of tradition costs you political capital. Eventually, you'll have nothing left to spend. He left with rigid formality. Rowan waited until the door closed before releasing the breath he'd been holding. His hands were shaking. Confronting Vincent directly claiming his father's methods had failed, these were not small rebellions. They were declarations of war against everything Silverwood stood for. Elena shifted Nova to a more comfortable position, still maintaining that crucial skin-to-skin contact. He's right, you know, about the political cost. The council will use this against you. I know. If it comes to a vote of no confidence, then I'll fight, and if I lose, we'll leave. Build a life somewhere our children can grow up without being suffocated by protocol. Rowan sat beside her, again exhaustion pulling at him. I'm done pretending, Elena. Done being the alpha everyone expects instead of the father our children need. What about the wolf you need to be? She asked it gently without judgment. You've spent 3 years trying to fill your father's place. Now you're rejecting everything he stood for. Who are you if you're not him? The question struck deep. Rowan had defined himself in relation to his father for so long, first trying to please him, then trying to escape him, now actively opposing him. Without that reference point, who was he? I don't know yet. I guess I'll figure it out. Nova whimpered a sound of distress that spiked Rowan's protective instincts. Elena tried to get her to latch, but the pup turned away too weak or too uncomfortable to feed. Iris's words echoed if she continues to decline. Fear closed around his throat. Nova was so small, so fragile. The thought of losing her, of watching another child die, despite his best efforts, was unbearable. Elena, what if I'm wrong? What if Vincent is right and the traditions actually do strengthen them? What if my rebellion kills her? Elena met his eyes steady despite her own fear. The traditions nearly killed me. If Iris had followed protocol and not let you into the birthing chamber, I'd be dead. You broke rules and saved my life. Trust that instinct now. He wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that love and proximity were enough. But doubt gnawed at the edges of certainty. What if he was simply imposing his own trauma onto a situation that didn't warrant it? What if his hatred of his father's methods blinded him to wisdom accumulated across generations? Nova's breathing grew more labored. Elena held her closer, whispering soothing sounds. Rowan felt helpless, watching them, unable to fix this with strength or command. Fatherhood was humbling in ways alpha authority never was. Should I get Iris again? His voice came out rough. Not yet. Give her time. Sometimes babies just need to feel safe before they can thrive. So they waited, sat together in the quiet birthing chamber while Caleb and Ash slept and Nova struggled for each breath. Morning light crept across stone floors. Servants brought food neither of them touched. The hours stretched, measured in heartbeats and shallow gasps. Finally, near noon, Nova's breathing evened out. She turned toward Elena's breast with more energy than she'd shown since birth and latched properly. Elena's sob of relief nearly broke Rowan's composure. There you are, little one. There you are. Nova nursed with surprising vigor, making up for lost time. Color returned to her tiny face. Her body relaxed, no longer fighting so hard just to exist. The transformation took minutes but felt miraculous. Rowan allowed himself to breathe again, to believe that maybe, just maybe, defying tradition had been the right choice. Nova needed her mother. needed warmth and proximity, and the kind of care that couldn't be codified in ritual. A knock at the door, gentler this time. Iris entered the saw Nova nursing successfully and smiled with visible relief. Good. This is very good. Her temperature should stabilize now. The crisis has passed. Thank the gods. Elena didn't look up from their daughter, too focused on maintaining the connection that had finally taken hold. Iris approached Rowan, voice lowered. Your Majesty, I need to tell you something. About your brother. Rowan stiffened. What about him? When Marcus was born, I advised your father to let your mother hold him more. Marcus was sensitive, needed extra comfort. Your father refused. Said the boy needed to learn strength from day one. Insisted on the full ritual protocol despite Marcus's obvious distress. Iris's ancient eyes held regret. I've always wondered if things might have been different. If maybe Marcus would have thrived with a gentler approach. Or if he still would have died and I'm just an old woman second-guessing decades-old decisions. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're doing what I wish your father had done. Choosing your children over protocol. I can't promise it will save Nova. Can't guarantee that love is enough. But I can tell you that watching you fight for her gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, we got it wrong all those years ago. The validation from Silverwood's most experienced healer meant more than Rowan could articulate. Iris had delivered him his brother, probably half the pack. If anyone understood the weight of tradition versus the needs of individual children, it was her. Thank you for telling me. Iris nodded and left them alone again. Elena finally looked up from Nova, tears streaming freely now. Did you hear that we're doing the right thing? We have to be. Rowan wanted to share her certainty. But he'd lived in Silverwood's political reality long enough to know that being right and winning were not the same thing. Vincent would keep pushing. The council would keep questioning. Eventually, defiance would demand a price he might not be able to pay. But for now, watching Nova nurse with growing strength, watching Elena's face soften with relief, watching Caleb and Ash sleep peacefully in their basket, for now this small victory was enough. The rebellion had begun. Whether it would succeed or destroy them remained to be seen. 2 weeks crawled past in careful routines. Nova gained weight slowly but steadily, her breathing stabilizing as Elena maintained constant contact. Caleb grew robust and demanding, his cries echoing through palace corridors at all hours. Ash observed everything with unsettling focus for an infant, quiet but intensely present. The council waited. Vincent made no further demands for ceremony, but his silence carried more menace than argument. Rowan felt eyes tracking him through every hallway, heard whispers die when he entered rooms. The pack was watching, wondering when their alpha would bend or break. Elena spent those 14 days in their chambers, rarely venturing beyond the nursery wing. She bathed the children herself each morning, using warm water heated over their private hearth. Rowan helped when duties allowed, learning the careful choreography of supporting tiny heads and keeping soap from sensitive eyes. These moments felt stolen, precious, and temporary, like holding breath underwater. On the 15th morning, Elena made her decision. I'm going to bathe them in the courtyard, today, where everyone can see. Rowan looked up from changing Ash's wrappings, surprise, halting his hands mid-motion. The council will see it as provocation. The council already sees me as a threat. I might as well give them something real to fear. Elena's jaw set with familiar determination. I won't hide anymore. Won't let them think I'm ashamed of choosing my children over their protocols. If we're going to fight tradition, let's fight it publicly. The logic was sound even as it terrified him. Defying Vincent in private chambers was one thing. Making a spectacle of that defiance was declaration of war. Then I'll stand with you. Elena's expression softened briefly before hardening back into resolve. Get a copper basin, wood for fire, clean linens. We do this simply the way my mother taught me. Rowan sent servants scrambling with quiet urgency. Within an hour, supplies appeared in the main courtyard, the ones surrounded by palace windows on 3 sides impossible to ignore. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, blanketing stone in pristine white. Elena scooped handfuls into the basin, packing it carefully while Rowan built a small fire from kindling. Windows filled with faces, servants first drawn by curiosity or scandal sense, then nobles alerted by whispers rippling through corridors. Council members appeared on the second-floor balcony, Vincent prominent among them. Lady Morgana stood slightly apart, expression unreadable. Rowan felt their judgment like physical weight, but kept his focus on the fire. Flames caught, grew, began heating copper. Snow melted into clear water, pure and simple. Elena tested temperature with her finger, nodded satisfaction, and turned to the servants holding their children. Bring them. Caleb came first, already fussing at the cold air on his skin. Elena lowered him into warm water with practiced wherein his complaints ceased immediately. She used her bare hands to pour water over his white fur, working it through with gentle efficiency. No oils, no blessed herbs, no ceremonial instruments. Just touch and warmth and a mother's focused attention. Rowan knelt beside her, close enough to shield the basin from wind without crowding her movements. He'd seen royal bathing rituals had endured them himself as an infant, though memory didn't stretch that far. Always elaborate, always distant servants performing prescribed motions, while parents observed from required positions. This was different, intimate, real. Elena began singing, voice soft, but carrying in the courtyard's acoustic peculiarity. An old song from Pinecrest, something about snow and stars and children blessed by winter. Rowan didn't know the words, but he recognized the melody from nights she'd hummed it while nursing. The courtyard fell absolutely silent. Even wind seemed to pause, holding breath alongside 300 witnessing wolves. Elena lifted Caleb from the basin, wrapped him in clean linen, passed him to Rowan with trust that still surprised him. Their son squirmed against his chest, seeking warmth. Rowan held him carefully, marveling at how something so small could radiate such concentrated heat. Ash next. He entered the water without protest, dark eyes tracking his mother's movements with that unsettling awareness. Elena washed him with the same care, singing, continuously creating rhythm from ritual. Rowan watched her hands move, confident despite their trembling, gentle despite their strength. This was what love looked like, stripped of ceremony and expectation. Pure need meeting, pure response. Then Nova, their smallest, most fragile daughter. Elena lifted her with special care, mindful of lingering weakness. The moment Nova touched water, she made a sound, not distress, but something close to contentment, a sigh of recognition, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this. Elena's eyes filled, watching their daughter relax. Nova had fought so hard those first days, struggled for every breath and every meal. Seeing her peaceful, now trusting, now felt like vindication of every choice that had led them here. Rowan shifted position to help support Nova's weight, and Elena's voice caught on the next verse. She finished the song anyway, power replacing melody while overcoming emotion. When Nova emerged from the basin, wrapped in dry, she was smiling. Actual infant joy, rare and breathtaking. The silence broke with single hands clapping. Rowan looked up, tracking the source. Sarah stood at a third-floor window, her 8-month-old daughter visible in her arms. The young mother's applause gained companions, scattered at first, then spreading. Not universal, not even majority, but enough to matter. Vincent didn't clap, neither did Morgana or the older council members. They stood frozen witnesses to something they couldn't quite classify. Heresy or hope, revolution or simple parenting. The ambiguity was its own threat. Elena gathered all 3 children against her chest, letting them draw warmth from proximity and each other. She looked up at the watching windows, met judgment with steady defiance, and spoke loud enough to carry. This is how children should be bathed. With love, with their mother's hands, with their father's protection. Let anyone who disagrees come tell me why cold ceremony serves better than warm care. The challenge hung in mountain air, unanswered, because unanswerable. Vincent's face darkened. Morgana's remained carefully neutral. Sarah smiled through tears. Rowan stood beside Elena, hand on her shoulder, presenting united front. Let the council see them together. Let the pack understand that this wasn't Luna overstepping. It was their alpha choosing family over tradition, consciously and without apology. They carried the children inside without waiting for response. Let Vincent summon his emergency council. Let tradition rally its defenders. The line had been drawn in melted snow and sung prayers. The consequences would come regardless. Better to meet them standing firm. The emergency council convened within 2 hours. Rowan entered the great hall to find that all 15 members assembled, Vincent presiding from the head table with prosecutor's gravity. Guards lined the walls, ceremonial positioning, but their presence added weight. This wasn't informal discussion. This was trial. Elena stood beside Rowan despite Vincent's visible disapproval at her presence. Luna typically attended councils only when specifically summoned. Her uninvited appearance was breach of protocol, another log on the fire they were collectively building. Vincent wasted no time on pleasantries. Elena, you stand accused of willful violation of sacred bathing protocols. You performed unauthorized ritual in public space using unapproved methods while refusing appointed servants their traditional role. Do you deny these charges? Elena met his glare without flinching. I deny their crimes. I bathed my children the way mothers have bathed children since wolves first walked upright. Your protocols are the aberration, not my methods. Gasps rippled through assembled counselors. Speaking to the High Counselor with such directness bordered on insubordination. Vincent's knuckles whitened where they gripped the table edge. With respect, Luna, you're new to our ways. Perhaps in Pinecrest such informality was acceptable, but Silverwood Pack has maintained standards for 8 generations. The royal line must be blessed with proper ceremony, not common water and folk songs. There's nothing common about a mother's love, and there's nothing sacred about making infants suffer for the sake of appearances. Vincent turned to Rowan, appeal and accusation mingling. Your Majesty, surely you see the danger in allowing this behavior to continue. If the Luna can simply dismiss protocols she finds inconvenient, what message does that send? What happens to order when individuals decide which rules apply to them? Rowan felt 15 pairs of eyes measuring him, weighing his response against expectations built over decades. His father had stood in this hall countless times, dispensing judgment without hesitation. Never questioned tradition, never showed doubt. High Counselor, I've been thinking about your question, about what happens when we blindly follow rules without examining their purpose. His voice carried steady across stone. 15 years ago, my brother Marcus died. The healers followed every protocol, performed every prescribed treatment, refused to deviate from tradition even when my mother begged them to try something different. Marcus died anyway, killed by rigidity disguised as wisdom. Vincent's expression flickered surprise, perhaps recognition. He'd been on the council then, had probably endorsed the healer's decisions. Your Majesty, your brother's death was tragedy, but it doesn't invalidate centuries of accumulated knowledge. The protocols exist because they work, because they've protected royal heirs through plague and famine and war. Have they? Or have we simply attributed survival to ritual, when luck and basic care deserve the credit? Rowan paced before the council table, gathering thoughts he'd suppressed for years. My daughter Nova was dying 2 weeks ago, failing to thrive despite proper protocol. Then Elena held her skin to skin, mother to child, and Nova recovered. Not through ceremony, through connection, through the kind of care your protocols actively prevent. Marcus, the council member, not Rowan's dead brother, spoke from his position near the back. Young, ambitious, his voice carried calculated concern. Your Majesty, we all rejoice at Nova's recovery, but you're making dangerous assumptions. Correlation isn't causation. Perhaps she simply needed time. Perhaps the protocols were working, and you credit the Luna's methods prematurely. Elena turned on him with controlled fury. My daughter couldn't breathe properly, wasn't eating, was growing weaker every hour. Your protocols kept her separated from me. The moment I held her, really held her, not observed her from required distance, she began healing. That's not correlation. That's cause and effect witnessed by Iris herself. Iris is a fine healer. Morgana spoke for the first time, her aged voice cutting through debate. But she's not infallible. I raised 5 sons following every tradition. 4 died in service to this pack, warriors who understood sacrifice. 1 survived strong because I didn't coddle him. The protocols made them capable of enduring what soft upbringing could not. The words landed like stones. 4 dead sons held up as evidence that hardship built character. Rowan wondered what kind of emptiness lived behind Morgana's eyes, what price she'd paid for that conviction. Elena didn't back down. 4 dead sons sounds like evidence that something's desperately wrong, not proof the system works. Morgana's face went pale with rage. How dare you? How dare I what? Question whether your suffering was necessary suggests that maybe, just maybe, love and support might have served better than rigid adherence to tradition that killed 4/5 of your children. The hall erupted, counselors shouting over each other, guards tensing, Vincent hammering the table for order. Rowan let it continue for 30 seconds, let them reveal their positions through instinctive reactions, then released alpha power in a wave that silenced every voice. Enough, the word resonated with command. We're not here to debate the past. We're here because I chose to support my mate's decision to care for our children personally. If that violates protocol, then protocol requires examination. Vincent regained control by force of will. Your Majesty, examination is one thing. Public defiance is another. You didn't simply question tradition, you made a spectacle of rejecting it. Every wolf in this palace watched you kneel in snow, participating in unauthorized ceremony. That's not reasoned reform. That's calculated insurrection. Calculated survival. Nova needed her mother. I chose my daughter's life over your approval. And what about the pack's stability? Your authority rests on the foundation of tradition. Undermine that foundation and everything collapses. Other wolves will see your defiance and assume they can pick which rules to follow. Chaos breeds faster than you can contain it. The argument held weight. Rowan couldn't deny that authority depended partially on consistent enforcement. But he'd watched consistent enforcement execute Thomas Garrett. Watched it kill his brother through adherence to protocol that ignored obvious distress. Then maybe our authority needs different foundation. Maybe strength comes from wisdom and adaptability, not blind obedience to rules that no longer serve their original purpose. Marcus leaned forward, voice carefully sympathetic. Your Majesty, I understand your position. Truly. But consider Iron Paw Pack has been testing our borders for months. Alpha Garrett looks for any sign of weakness to exploit. This public display of sentiment over strength, he'll see it as invitation. The mention of external threat shifted atmosphere in the hall. Several counselors nodded agreement. Rowan felt the ground shifting beneath his argument, external danger weaponized against internal reform. Garrett is always looking for weakness. That's his nature. But actual weakness is having a pack so rigid it can't adapt, so fragile, that one alpha choosing his family over ceremony threatens to break it. Vincent stood, commanding attention through sheer presence. I call for a vote. Council of 15, you've heard the Luna's actions and the Alpha's defense. Do we maintain confidence in Alpha Rowan's leadership, or do we invoke the ancient right of challenge? The room went cold. Ancient right was exactly what it sounded like. If the council voted no confidence, any member could challenge the Alpha to ritual combat for leadership. Winner took the pack, loser typically died. Rowan met Vincent's eyes and saw calculation there. The old wolf was betting that fear of Iron Paw combined with offense at broken tradition would turn enough votes. Was probably right. The council skewed conservative wolves who'd served under Rowan's father and shared his values. I accept the vote. What choice did he have? Refusal would be admission of weakness. But I want the pack to witness, not just the council deciding in private chambers. Vincent hesitated, then nodded. Assemble the witnesses. Guards opened the great hall doors. Servants and warriors flooded in, summoned by runners who'd been standing ready. Within minutes, 200 wolves packed the space, pressed shoulder to shoulder, watching history unfold. Sarah stood near the front, her daughter clutched tight. Rowan saw fear and hope warring on her face, fear of consequences, hope for change. She wasn't alone. Scattered throughout the crowd, younger wolves watched with similar expressions. The ones who'd seen Elena's public bathing and recognized something familiar. Something true. Vincent addressed the assembled pack. The Council of 15 will vote confidence in Alpha Rowan's continued leadership. Those who vote confidence, he retains position. Those who vote challenge any counselor may invoke ancient right to ritual combat. The pack bears witness to this decision. One by one, counselors stated their vote. The first 5 split 3 confidence, 2 challenge. Rowan's jaw tightened. Closer than he'd hoped. If it came down to final votes, Marcus spoke his vote with studied reluctance. Challenge, I love our Alpha, but love isn't leadership strength. We need certainty Silverwood can weather what's coming. More votes. 4 more confidence, 3 more challenge. Current count 7 confidence, 5 challenge. 3 votes remained. Rowan needed 2 of them. Morgana stood slowly, ancient bones creaking. Every eye fixed on her. She'd been Luna before Rowan's birth had known his grandfather carried authority that transcended official position. I've spent 60 years in this pack. Buried a husband, raised 5 sons, watched 4 die. I enforced every tradition, followed every protocol, believed absolutely that hardship built strength. Her voice cracked slightly. And I'm tired, so desperately tired of watching children suffer in the name of values that killed my sons. The Luna is right. 4 dead children isn't proof the system works. It's proof the system failed. I vote confidence. Shocked silence. Morgana supporting reform. The old guard's foundational pillar cracking, Vincent's face drained of color. 8 confidence, 5 challenge. 1 vote left. The final counselor was elderly. Thomas, no relation to the executed Thomas Garrett, but old enough to remember 3 alphas. He stood with difficulty, leaning on his cane, roomy eyes distant. My granddaughter had a son last year. Beautiful boy, strong, but he cried constantly during the blessing rituals, screamed like his soul was being torn apart. We told her it was normal, that he'd adjust. He died at 3 months. The healers said it was his heart. But I wonder, Thomas's voice broke, I wonder if maybe he just needed his mother's touch more than our traditions. I vote confidence. 9-5. Rowan retained leadership, but Vincent wasn't finished. He stood alpha power radiating despite his age. The vote is recorded. Alpha Rowan maintains council confidence. However, I invoke my personal right as High Counselor. I challenge your fitness under ancient law. Not to take your position, I'm too old for that burden, but to test whether your choices stem from wisdom or sentiment. To prove to this pack that strength still matters. The challenge was unexpected tactical. Vincent wasn't trying to become alpha. He was forcing Rowan to defend his philosophy in combat, making the coming fight symbolic rather than purely practical. Rowan felt Elena tense beside him, but kept his focus on Vincent. What are the terms? 30 days. Winter Council convenes here, all Northern Alphas gathering as tradition requires. You prove your strength before them, not just physical, but philosophical. Prove that your methods serve Silverwood better than the old ways. Fail, and any alpha present may challenge you for crown and pack. Succeed, and I'll support your reforms personally. The terms were viciously clever. Winter Council was political nightmare, 12 packs, gathering alliances, tested territories negotiated. Hosting while appearing divided was invitation for vultures. Garrett would absolutely attend, looking for any excuse to challenge. I accept your terms. Vincent smiled, cold and satisfied. Then let the 30 days begin. May the old gods grant you the wisdom you believe you possess. The council dissolved into chaos. Counselors arguing, wolves choosing sides. Sarah and others rushing toward Elena with desperate questions. Rowan let it wash over him, focusing on the countdown that had just started. 30 days to prove love could be strength. 30 days to maintain pack unity while external enemies circled. 30 days to either revolutionize Silverwood or lose everything trying. He met Elena's eyes. She nodded once, fear and determination balanced perfectly. Together, her hand in his, they faced the storm they deliberately summoned. Yada. Intelligence reports started arriving within a week. Iron Paw Pack had increased patrols along the border, their scouts probing for weaknesses in Silverwood defenses. Garrett had sent formal notice he would attend Winter Council along with his full retinue of warriors. The message was clear. He smelled blood in the water. Marcus took personal charge of border security, organizing patrol rotations with impressive efficiency. Rowan watched the younger wolf work, seeing ambition beneath competence. Marcus wanted to prove himself indispensable, positioning for future influence. Not necessarily malicious, but definitely calculated. We need to pull warriors from the eastern sector to reinforce the western border, Marcus reported during morning briefing. Iron Paw's focus is there. They're testing response times. Rowan studied the tactical maps spread across his desk. Pulling east leaves us vulnerable to raids from Northwind Pack. Northwind hasn't moved against us in 5 years. They're not the threat. They weren't the threat. Doesn't mean they won't become one if we show weakness. Rowan adjusted troop markers, split the difference. Move half the eastern complement west. Keep enough to maintain presence. Marcus nodded, but Rowan caught the flicker of disagreement in his expression. The young warrior thought he was being too cautious. Probably right from purely tactical standpoint. But Rowan was playing longer game now, trying to project strength while managing internal division. After Marcus left, Elena entered with Nova cradled against her chest. Their daughter had gained weight steadily, her breathing strong and even. The transformation from fragile newborn to thriving infant felt miraculous validation of every choice that had led them here. Sarah came to me this morning. She wants to bathe her daughter the way I bathe ours. Asked if I'd teach her. Rowan looked up from the maps processing implications. If she follows your example publicly, it'll be seen as direct challenge to the council's authority. I know, I told her that. She said she doesn't care. Her daughter's been miserable during the ceremonial bathings. Sarah can't watch it anymore. The decision was Elena's to make, but Rowan understood the political ramifications. One mother adopting new methods could be dismissed as Luna's personal choice. Multiple mothers constituting a movement would force the council to respond more aggressively. Vincent will escalate, probably try to forbid it through pack law. Let him try. You can't legislate how a mother cares for her child. Elena's jaw set with familiar stubbornness. Besides, we're already at war with tradition. Might as well build an army. The logic was sound even as it terrified him. Every ally they recruited was another potential target for Vincent's retaliation. But staying isolated meant certain defeat. Revolutions required numbers. Teacher, and anyone else who asks, but be careful. The closer we get to Winter Council, the more desperate Vincent becomes. Desperate wolves make dangerous choices. Elena kissed his forehead and left with Nova already planning her quiet insurgency. Rowan returned to tactical maps, trying to solve problems that multiplied faster than solutions. 3 more mothers approached Elena within days. Then 5, then a dozen. The courtyard became unofficial gathering place, each morning Elena teaching while other mothers watched and learned. Not just bathing techniques, but philosophy. The idea that parental instinct mattered more than prescribed protocol, that children thrived on connection rather than ceremony. Sarah's husband, a warrior named Derek, confronted Rowan in the training yard. My wife defies tradition because your mate gives her permission. The other warriors are watching your majesty, wondering if you've lost control. Rowan paused mid-strike, practice sword lowering. Has your daughter improved since Sarah changed her approach? Derek's jaw worked. She cries less, sleeps better, but that's not the point. That's exactly the point. Your daughter's healthier. Your mate is happier. Your family is stronger. How is that losing control? Because other families are fracturing, husbands forbidding their wives, wives defying their husbands. The pack is dividing along lines that didn't exist a month ago. The observation stung because it was accurate. Silverwood was splitting progressives versus traditionalists, younger versus older, those who'd experienced the gentler approach versus those who defended rigid protocol. The fault lines ran through families, friendships, military units. Growing pains, Rowan said, more hope than certainty. The pack is evolving. Evolution is uncomfortable. Derek didn't look convinced. He saluted and returned to his training, but Rowan saw doubt in his posture. How many others shared it? How many warriors would stand with him if Garrett challenged? How many would step aside, letting external threat solve internal conflict? The questions haunted him through 2 more weeks of mounting tension. Border incidents increased minor clashes, property damage, provocations designed to test Silverwood's unity. Marcus wanted aggressive response. Vincent counseled caution. Rowan navigated between them, trying to project strength without inviting full war. Then came the night that changed everything. The attack hit at midnight during new moon darkness. Iron Paw warriors breached the western perimeter in coordinated strike, not scouts this time, but full assault team. 40 wolves moving with military precision, objectives clear. They weren't trying to take territory, they were going for the palace, for the heirs. Alarms woke Rowan from restless sleep. Elena bolted upright beside him, instantly alert. Guards burst through the door without ceremony. Iron Paw infiltration, they're inside the palace. Rowan shifted to wolf form mid-stride, racing toward the nursery 3 quarters away. Elena followed her wolf, leaner but faster. They could hear fighting ahead, snarls and screams, metal on stone bodies hitting walls. The nursery door hung open, torn from hinges. Inside, two guards lay dead, throats ripped out. Three Iron Paw warriors surrounded the children's basket, reaching for precious cargo. Rowan hit them like an avalanche fury, overriding tactical thought. First warrior went down with crushed windpipe. Second met Elena's teeth in his shoulder. Her smaller frame compensated by absolute maternal rage. Third turned to face Rowan, and that hesitation was fatal. Two more Iron Paw burst through the window glass, shattering. Rowan killed one before it fully entered. Elena grappled the second, keeping it away from the basket where all three pups cried in terror. More Silverwood guards arrived, the fight expanding into brutal chaos. Rowan fought with singular focus, protect the children, destroy anything threatening them. Blood sprayed across walls. Bodies piled near the window. The nursery became slaughterhouse instinct, overwhelming strategy. When it ended, 6 Iron Paw lay dead. 3 Silverwood guards, 2 sacrificed defending the heirs. 2 Iron Paw warriors had been captured alive, subdued by Marcus and his unit. One had escaped through the window, vanishing into darkness before anyone could pursue. Rowan shifted back to human form, chest heaving. Elena already had the children gathered against her, checking for injuries with trembling hands. All 3 were unharmed, terrified but whole. Caleb wailed with impressive volume. Ash watched everything with those unsettling dark eyes. Nova clung to Elena, making small, distressed sounds. Marcus stood over the captured Iron Paw blade at their throats. "Your orders, Your Majesty." Rowan's first instinct was execution. Immediate, brutal, unambiguous. But he forced himself to think past rage. "Interrogation first. I want to know how they got past our defenses, who provided intelligence on nursery layout and guard schedules, because that information wasn't accessible to external scouts. Someone inside Silverwood had betrayed them. The prisoners were dragged to holding cells. Rowan posted triple guards on the nursery and relocated his family to more secure chambers. Elena refused to let the children out of her sight, holding all 3 despite their combined weight. Rowan understood completely. He spent the rest of the night coordinating response damage assessment, perimeter reinforcement, casualty notifications. Dawn found him exhausted and furious, standing over 2 Iron Paw prisoners who'd been softened by Marcus's efficient questioning. "Talk, now, or I feed you to your own pack piece by piece." The larger prisoner stayed silent. The smaller one, younger, less experienced, cracked under alpha pressure. "We had inside help. Someone gave us the layout, guard rotation schedules, told us when the heirs would be most vulnerable." Rowan's blood went cold. "Who tell?" "I don't know. Our alpha dealt with them directly. We just followed orders." Marcus appeared in the doorway, expression grim. "Your Majesty, we found the servant who provided the information. He worked for High Counselor Vincent. Been sending intelligence to Iron Paw for weeks." Rowan's world tilted. Vincent, the old wolf, had opposed him, yes, but outright betrayal, conspiring with Iron Paw to steal the heirs. "Where is he?" "Dead. Took poison when we confronted him. But we found correspondence in his quarters, letters detailing nursery security guard patterns, even the children's feeding schedules." Rowan stormed toward Vincent's chambers, Marcus and 6 guards following. He found the High Counselor awake, dressed clearly, anticipating this confrontation. "Your Majesty, I heard about the attack. Tragic. Your servant betrayed us to Iron Paw. Gave them everything they needed to steal my children." Vincent's face remained impassive. "If true, he'll answer for it, but I knew nothing of his actions. He was your man, Vincent. Worked in your household for 20 years. You expect me to believe he acted without your knowledge? I expect you to require proof before accusing your High Counselor of treason." Vincent's voice hardened. "Your paranoia doesn't constitute evidence." Marcus stepped forward, holding a bundle of letters. "We found these. Communication between the servant and someone in Iron Paw. Detailed plans to kidnap the heirs during the raid, use them as leverage to force Alpha Rowan's abdication." Vincent's expression cracked slightly. "I never authorized—" "But you knew." Rowan saw truth in the old wolf's eyes. "Maybe didn't give explicit orders, but you knew your man was compromised, and you let it continue." "Why?" Silence stretched. When Vincent finally spoke, his voice carried something almost like regret. "I thought if Iron Paw succeeded, the pack would see that your softness endangered them. That tradition existed to prevent exactly this chaos. I didn't think they'd actually hurt the children, just take them long enough to prove a point." The admission hung in air between them. Not malicious intent exactly, just catastrophic miscalculation by a wolf so committed to his philosophy that he'd risked everything to prove it. Rowan felt fury compete with exhausted disappointment. You gambled with my children's lives to win a political argument. I gambled with controlled risk to save this pack from your dangerous experiment. Clearly, I miscalculated. Rowan ordered Vincent arrested, immediately confined to quarters pending formal trial. The old wolf went without protest, dignity intact even in disgrace. But something nagged at Rowan's mind, a detail that didn't fit cleanly. Marcus, assemble a detail. I want every piece of correspondence from Vincent's household examined, every servant questioned. If there are more traitors, I want them found. Marcus saluted and moved to comply, but Rowan caught the briefest hesitation. Micro-expression barely visible. Tension around the eyes that suggested calculation rather than shock. Rowan's instincts, honed through years of reading pack dynamics, screamed warning. Actually, Marcus, stay. Send someone else for that detail. The younger wolf froze mid-step. Your Majesty, I have questions about the attack. Your unit responded impressively fast, almost as if you were already positioned nearby. Rowan kept his tone conversational, but let alpha power simmer beneath words. Where were you when the alarm sounded? Perimeter patrol, Western Sector. We heard the breach and rushed back. Western Sector. Rowan pulled the tactical map closer, tracing routes with his finger. That's 15 minutes from the palace at full sprint. You arrived in 8. Marcus's jaw tightened. We were closer than standard patrol. I had concerns about security, positioned myself strategically. Strategic positioning based on what intelligence? The attack plan wasn't known to anyone except Ironpaw and whoever gave them the layout. Rowan circled slowly, watching Marcus track him with predator awareness. Unless you knew it was coming. Your Majesty, I would never. The servant who betrayed us worked for Vincent, but Vincent's not smart enough to coordinate this alone. He's brilliant politically, but military tactics aren't his strength. The patrol rotations, the timing, the precise knowledge of when guards would be minimal, that required someone with tactical mind. Rowan stopped directly in front of Marcus. Someone like you. Marcus's hand drifted toward his blade. Subtle, instinctive. Guards around the room tensed, reading threat. Careful, Rowan warned. Whatever you're considering, think it through. For 10 seconds, Marcus seemed to weigh options. Then his shoulders slumped, infinitesimally, defeat leaking through Warrior's posture. I didn't want them hurt. The children. You have to believe that. Rowan's blood turned to ice. Explain, now. Garrett approached me 6 months ago, before the heirs were born. Offered alliance. If I helped him take the crown, he'd negotiate peace between our packs. No more border wars, no more wasted resources fighting over frozen territory neither of us truly needs. Marcus's voice carried desperate justification. I thought I was serving Silverwood's interests. By conspiring with our enemy to kidnap my children. By preventing the war your softness was going to cause. You broke traditions, showed weakness, made us vulnerable. The pack needed strong leadership. I thought if Garrett held the heirs temporarily, you'd be forced to step down. I'd challenge, win the crown, negotiate their return, and Silverwood would have both peace and strength. The twisted logic was almost impressive. Marcus had convinced himself that betrayal was patriotism, that collaborating with the enemies served the pack's interests. You gambled with my children's lives for your ambition, for the pack's survival. Marcus's control fractured. You were tearing us apart, mothers fighting fathers, tradition being destroyed, external threats circling, while you played house with the Luna. Someone had to act. Rowan studied the younger wolf, seeing desperation beneath defiance. Marcus genuinely believed his own justification. Believed Rowan's love for his family was weakness that endangered Silverwood. Did Vincent know about your arrangement with Garrett? No, I used his servant without his knowledge. Let him take the blame while I positioned myself to step in as savior. Marcus laughed bitterly. Ironic that you saw through it anyway. Guards moved to restrain Marcus, but Rowan raised a hand, stopping them. You have a choice. Stand trial here where the pack you claim to serve will judge your betrayal. Or trial by combat, you challenge me now. Winner takes the crown and decides the loser's fate. Marcus's eyes widened. You'd give me that chance after everything. I'm giving you the opportunity to prove your conviction. If you truly believe I'm unfit to lead, fight me for it. Let strength decide the way wolves have settled disputes since the beginning. The offer hung between them, mercy disguised as challenge or challenge disguised as mercy. Marcus's hand went to his blade properly. This time, decision made. I accept trial by combat. Serum. They fought in the Great Hall, witnessed by 300 assembled wolves. No ceremony, no ritual preparation, just two warriors in human form, blades drawn fighting for crown and pack. Marcus was skilled fast, younger by 5 years. He came at Rowan with fury and technique, blade work honed through countless training sessions. But Rowan had fought his father's style, brutal, efficient, uncompromising. Had learned to survive opponents who gave no quarter. The duel lasted 7 minutes. Rowan took a slash across his ribs, felt blood soak his shirt. Marcus fought with desperate energy, knowing this was his only chance. But desperation made fighters sloppy, and Rowan had patience earned through experience. He waited for the opening, Marcus overextending on a thrust weight forward, and exploited it ruthlessly. Rowan's blade took Marcus in the shoulder, deep enough to disable without killing. The younger wolf dropped his weapon, stumbling to his knees. Rowan could have finished it. Traditional combat demanded death for the loser. The pack expected it, murmured approval already forming. One strike would end the threat Marcus represented. Instead, Rowan kicked the fallen blade away and stepped back. I won't kill you. You're exiled from Silverwood, effective immediately. Take nothing but the clothes you are wearing. If you ever return, I'll finish what we started here. Marcus stared up at him, shock and confusion warring on his face. Why I betrayed you. Traditional punishment is death. Because killing you would prove your point that strength requires brutality. That the only way to lead is through fear and violence. Rowan sheathed his blade. I'm building something different here. Something that doesn't require me to become my father to survive. He turned to address the assembled pack, letting them see his bleeding ribs, his unsheathed blade. Marcus believed love made me weak. Believed caring for my family compromised my ability to lead. He's not alone in that belief. Half this pack probably shares it. But I'm still standing, still fought, still won. Not because I abandoned what matters, but because it gave me something worth fighting for. Silence filled the hall. Then Sarah, standing near the front with her daughter, began clapping. Slowly, hesitantly at first, then with conviction. Others joined, mostly younger wolves, mostly mothers, but enough to matter. Not universal approval, but acknowledgement. Vincent was brought forward in chains, expecting execution alongside Marcus. Rowan studied the old wolf, seeing exhaustion beneath rigid dignity. You didn't conspire with Marcus directly, but your philosophy enabled him. Your insistence that tradition trumped everything else created the justification he needed. Vincent met his eyes steadily. I served your father loyally for 30 years. Served this pack with everything I had. If my service ends in execution, I'll accept that fate. It doesn't end in execution. Rowan gestured and guards removed the chains. It ends in choice. You can leave with Marcus, maintain your convictions in exile. Or you can stay, help me build something better, and prove that wisdom can grow with age. Vincent's composure cracked for the first time. Why show me mercy I don't deserve? Because I need allies who understand both tradition and change. Need someone who can help me preserve what matters while transforming what doesn't. Rowan extended his hand. Help me, Vincent. Really help me. Not enforce your vision through mine, but collaborate on building something neither of us could create alone. The old wolf stared at the offered hand for long moments. Then slowly he reached out and clasped it. I'll need to research the original traditions, their purposes, how they have evolved. If we're going to reform, we should do it informed by history rather than reacting against it. Agreed. Start with the bathing rituals. I want to know when they were originally designed to accomplish. Vincent nodded and withdrew. Marcus was escorted from the hall, exile beginning immediately. Rowan stood alone before his pack, bleeding and exhausted, wondering if mercy had been wisdom or fatal mistake. Only time would tell. Vincent spent the next week buried in archives, emerging with texts Rowan had never seen. Ancient records predating written history, oral traditions transcribed centuries after the fact. The original bathing ritual, Vincent explained, spreading documents across Rowan's desk, was exactly what the Luna did. Pure water typically melted snow. Mother's hands, father's presence. The pack witnessing to acknowledge the child's arrival. Then when did it change? 300 years ago, Alpha Dominic, paranoid and controlling, added the elaborate ceremony. The blessed oils, the appointed servants, the separation of parents. He claimed divine inspiration, but historical context suggests it was about control, creating dependence on specialized knowledge that only he and his chosen servants possessed. Rowan studied the ancient texts, seeing truth in faded ink. So Elena didn't reject tradition. She restored it. Precisely, which gives us ammunition for Winter Council. Well, Vincent's strategic mind was already working angles. If you present your methods as honoring original tradition, while other packs have corrupted it, you shift from heretic to purist. The political brilliance was undeniable. Rowan could defend his choices not as radical innovation, but as conservative restoration. It might not convince everyone, but it provided cover for those inclined to support him. Garrett won't care about historical precedent. He'll challenge regardless, using pack division as excuse. Then you need to demonstrate unity before he arrives. Show him a pack that's stronger for your reforms, not weaker. Vincent's expression turned calculating, which means finishing what the Luna started. Make the new approach not just permitted, but encouraged. Over the following week, Rowan formally abolished the requirement for ceremonial bathing servants, made parental care the default with traditional ceremony available for those who wanted it. The change was announced as return to ancient practice validated by Vincent's research. Resistance remained, older wolves muttered about decay of standards, but opposition lost coherence without Vincent to organize it. Morgana threw her support behind the reforms, speaking publicly about regretting the distance ceremonial requirements had imposed between her and her sons. Sarah and 12 other mothers formed unofficial council teaching Elena's methods to anyone interested. The courtyard gatherings became daily occurrence, fathers increasingly joining their mates. The sight of families bathing children together, laughing despite exhaustion, created new normal almost overnight. But external threat remained. Ironpaw increased border provocations, clearly building toward confrontation. Garrett sent formal notice he'd arrive for Winter Council with 50 warriors, unprecedented show of force. Marcus coordinated defense preparations with grim efficiency, training intensifying. Rowan sparred with his best fighters, honing edge that had dulled during months of political maneuvering. If Garrett challenged, the combat would be brutal. The Ironpaw Alpha was legendary warrior, older but viciously experienced. Elena watched him train Nova, always in her arms. Their daughter had grown strong, nearly matching her brothers in size now. The weakness that had threatened her life seemed distant memory. "You're afraid," Elena observed one evening. Not accusation, but acknowledgement. Terrified. "Garrett is better fighter than I am. Everyone knows it." "Then don't fight him as warrior. Fight him as alpha, as father, as wolf who has something worth protecting." She shifted Nova to more comfortable position. "Marcus fought for ambition. You'll fight for us. That's not weakness, it's entirely different kind of strength." Rowan pulled her close, breathing in lavender and milk and home. "If I lose, you won't, because you can't. We need you too much." The faith in her voice steadied something in his chest. He'd spent 3 years trying to fill his father's boots, trying to match impossible standard. Maybe it was time to stop trying to be Magnus and start being Rowan. Winter Council arrived with the first blizzard of December. 12 northern packs descended on Silverwood Palace Alphas, and their retinues filling every available chamber. The gathering happened annually, ostensibly for alliance maintenance and dispute resolution. In practice, it was political theater and dominance display. Garrett arrived last, 50 Ironpaw warriors at his back. He was massive, even for an alpha, 7 feet in human form, shoulders like boulders, scars mapping a lifetime of violence. His eyes found Rowan immediately, cold assessment without greeting. The formal session convened in the Great Hall, all 12 alphas seated according to territory size and historical precedent. Garrett commanded attention despite not being host, his presence dominating simply through physical threat. "We're here to discuss border disputes and trade agreements." Rowan opened, following traditional format. "Silverwood proposes. I propose we discuss your fitness to lead." Garrett's voice rolled like thunder. "Your pack is divided. Your Luna defies sacred tradition. You've shown more concern for infant comfort than territorial security. These are not qualities of strength. Other alphas shifted uncomfortably. Directly challenging host during opening remarks violated protocol, but no one wanted to defend Rowan against Garrett's implicit threat. My pack is evolving, not divided. My Luna honors tradition older than yours. And my children are healthy and thriving, which seems relevant to discussing fitness. Rowan kept his voice level, despite adrenaline screaming fight or flight. If you have formal challenge, state it properly. Garrett smiled, all teeth and malice. I challenge your right to Silverwood crown. Trial by combat winner takes pack losers. Family becomes spoils of victory. Traditional terms. The room went silent. Spoils of victory meant Elena and the children would belong to Garrett if Rowan lost. Ancient practice rarely invoked anymore, but technically valid under pack law. Rowan felt fury rise, pushed it down through sheer will. Garrett was trying to provoke emotional response, make him fight stupid. I accept your challenge with one modification. Combat determines crown only. Families remain sacred regardless of outcome. That's not traditional terms. Traditional terms are barbaric and I won't honor them. Fight me for the pack if you must, but my mate and children are not prizes to be won. Garrett stood, alpha power filling the hall. You refuse traditional challenge, that's admission of weakness. Proof you're unfit. It's proof I won't participate in slavery disguised as tradition. Rowan rose to meet him, their power colliding in the space between. Your choice, Garrett. Fight me for the crown under civilized terms or admit you only wanted an excuse to legitimize kidnapping. The other alphas watched with predatory focus. This was what they'd come for: conflict, dominance, assertion, the violent theater that confirmed hierarchy. Several looked ready to side with Garrett purely for momentum. Then Vincent stood, ancient texts in hand. Alpha Garrett, you claim to defend tradition, but spoils of victory was never pack law. It was individual practice by specific alphas condemned by the majority, even in historical records. True tradition, validated across multiple sources, holds that mates and children remain sacrosanct regardless of combat outcome. Garrett's eyes narrowed. High Counselor Vincent, I heard you opposed your alpha's reforms. Why defend him now? Because I was wrong. Vincent's voice carried across stone. I spent 40 years enforcing rules without questioning their purpose. Alpha Rowan forced me to examine foundations, and I discovered we'd built on corrupted ground. His methods aren't rebellion, they're restoration of values we'd forgotten. The testimony from Silverwood's staunchest traditionalist shifted atmosphere. Alphas who'd been leaning toward Garrett reconsidered reading political currents. Garrett saw his advantage slipping. Fine, combat for crown only, but I'll still take your pack when I win, and your family will have no place in Silverwood under my leadership. Then let's settle this. They fought on Frozen Lake behind the palace traditional combat ground, where ice provided treacherous footing and no advantage to either fighter. All 12 packs assembled on the shore, hundreds of witnesses forming a ring around the designated space. Rowan and Garrett shifted to wolf form simultaneously. Garrett was larger by 50 pounds, his gray coat scarred and grizzled. Rowan's white fur marked him as royal bloodline, but size mattered in wolf combat. They circled, assessing. Garrett moved with deceptive speed, for his bulk balanced and controlled. Rowan watched for tells, looking for patterns. His father had taught him to read opponents through micro-movements, weight shifts, muscle tension, eye tracking. Garrett lunged first, massive jaws going for Rowan's throat. Rowan dodged left ice, betraying his footing. He slipped, recovered, barely in time to avoid follow-up strike. Garrett's teeth caught his shoulder, tearing fur and flesh. Pain focused him. Rowan abandoned defensive strategy, going on offense. He was faster, could exploit that advantage. Went low, targeting Garrett's legs, trying to destabilize the bigger wolf. Garrett adapted, using weight as weapon. He crashed into Rowan bodily, sending them both sliding across ice. They grappled, teeth and claws, seeking purchase. Rowan felt ribs crack under Garrett's weight, tasted blood. The watching packs roared encouragement or dismay, depending on allegiance. Rowan heard Elena's voice above the rest, screaming his name. Heard his children crying from wherever she held them. He thought about Marcus's words that love made him weak. Thought about his father's philosophy that connection was liability. Then he thought about holding Nova while she struggled to breathe, about Elena nearly dying to bring them life, about the 3 precious lives that depended on him surviving this. Garrett was fighting for pride. for territory, for dominance and hierarchy he'd spent decades climbing. Rowan was fighting for family, for the right to raise his children with love instead of protocol, for future where strength didn't require cruelty. Entirely different kind of fight. He changed tactics completely. Stopped trying to match Garrett's brutal power, started using precision and speed Elena had taught him. Wolf combat was chess, not brawling. Anticipation mattered more than size. Rowan feinted right, went left when Garrett committed. Got inside the bigger wolf's reach. Targeted vulnerabilities. Joints. Tendons. Pressure points. Garrett roared frustration, powerful but increasingly off balance. The fight turned, slowly, painfully, but turned. Garrett bleeding from dozen small wounds, none fatal but accumulating. Rowan hurt badly, ribs broken, shoulder torn, but still mobile, still thinking clearly. Final exchange happened fast. Garrett, frustrated and tiring, made desperate lunge. Rowan sidestepped, used Garrett's momentum against him. The bigger wolf's trajectory carried him toward ice-edge feet, scrambling for purchase that wasn't there. Garrett went down hard, head striking ice with sickening crack. He tried to rise legs, giving out. Tried again, collapsing. Rowan limped forward, stood over the fallen alpha. Traditional end was death finish, defeated opponent, eliminate threat permanently. The assembled packs expected it, murmured approval already forming. Rowan shifted back to human form, naked and bleeding on ice, and extended his hand. It's done, you lost. But you don't have to die for it. Garrett stared at the offered hand, confusion and rage mixing. You mock me with mercy. I show you the future, where strength doesn't require bodies piled at our feet, where we can fight without killing, compete without destroying. Rowan's voice carried across silent witnesses. Take my hand, Garrett. Let's end this cycle. For agonizing seconds, Garrett simply stared. Then slowly he shifted back to human form and accepted the hand, letting Rowan pull him upright. The watching packs erupted, some in approval, some in shock, some in outrage at breach of tradition. But Elena was crying with relief, and their children were safe, and Rowan had won without becoming his father. That was enough. 1 year later, winter returned to Silverwood Palace. Rowan stood in the courtyard watching Elena bathe their children. Now toddlers, rambunctious and healthy. Caleb splashed water everywhere. Ash observed with quiet intensity. Nova sang along with her mother's lullaby voice, sweet and clear. 20 other families joined them, fathers and mothers, both creating community from what had been isolated ritual. Sarah's daughter played with Nova best friends despite age difference. Derek stood beside his mate, no longer conflicted about defying tradition that had proven harmful. Garrett attended too surprisingly. The Iron Paw Alpha had negotiated genuine peace after his defeat, trading hostility for alliance. His own daughter had just given birth, and he'd come seeking Elena's guidance. Your Luna's methods work, Garrett admitted grudgingly, watching his granddaughter thrive under gentler care. I fought you because I thought sentiment was weakness. Turns out I was just old and stubborn. You're still old and stubborn, but you're learning. That counts. Vincent appeared carrying more ancient text, research continuing even after reforms were implemented. The old wolf had become unexpected ally, using his encyclopedic knowledge to ground changes in historical precedent. Found something interesting, Vincent announced. The original pack laws specifically state that traditions should evolve with each generation. That clinging to outdated practice was considered greater sin than thoughtful innovation. Rowan laughed. So my father was the heretic, not me. Theologically speaking, yes. Vincent's rare smile appeared, though I'd recommend not phrasing it quite that way during formal ceremonies. Morgana joined them, moving slowly but with dignity and tact. She'd become Elena's fiercest defender, speaking about her regrets to any who'd listen. 4 dead sons haunted her still, but helping save current generation provided purpose in her final years. My grandson just wrote, she told Rowan. He's bringing his mate and new daughter to visit next month. First time in 5 years he's chosen to come home. Your reforms gave me family back I thought I'd lost forever. The transformations multiplied, families reuniting, wolves returning from exile, young parents raising children without fear of protocol. Silverwood grew stronger not despite the changes, but because of them. That evening, Rowan found Elena in their chambers, with all 3 children finally asleep. I've been thinking, she said, curled against his side, about what we've built here. It's not perfect, We still have wolves who resist traditions that need examining, but it's better, tangibly, measurably better. Thanks to you, your courage to question what everyone else accepted. Thanks to us. I questioned, but you had the authority to act. Partnership made this possible. Rowan kissed her forehead, grateful beyond words. 3 years ago, he'd married a stranger for political alliance. Now he held his mate, his partner, his Luna, who'd revolutionized everything by simply insisting children deserved love. What do we tackle next? He asked. Mating ceremonies. Young wolves should choose their partners, not have them assigned for political advantage. He laughed. That'll be controversial. Good. Controversy means we're still pushing forward. Years passed. Their children grew strong and happy, raised with both duty and devotion. Caleb learned to lead with strength and compassion. Ash developed strategic mind that rivaled Vincent's. Nova became the voice challenging her generation to continue evolving. At 19, Nova stood before the council. Vincent present, at 83 still, sharp, proposing another reform. Rowan watched his daughter argue with eloquence and conviction, pride overwhelming him. You taught me this, Nova told him later, that traditions serve us, not the other way around, that each generation has responsibility to examine, question, and improve. I taught you that. You lived it. That's better than teaching. Rowan thought about his father, the tyrant who died alone because he valued strength over connection. Thought about Marcus, his brother who died because protocol mattered more than obvious distress. Thought about the wolf he'd almost become cold and distant and convinced that love was weakness. Then he looked at his daughter, fierce and brilliant and utterly unafraid, and knew he'd chosen right. The revolution hadn't been loud, hadn't required violence beyond what was necessary for survival. It had been mother kneeling in snow, choosing love over law, and a pack brave enough to follow. Some traditions deserve to die, others deserve to be reborn. The wisest wolves knew the difference. Rowan had learned that difference one melted snowflake at a time.